The arena was built to mock death, a colossal coliseum, floating in the vacuum orbit of the execution planet Corridvi. It shone like a jewel of cruelty, half metal, half bone. Towers of alien skulls framed the walls, and the sand below was not sand at all, but powdered bone and ash. Every seat was filled. 30,000 throats howled for blood, but none made a sound louder than silence when he entered. They called him a boy. 17, human, barefoot, hands bound in electro-cuffs that pulsed with blue volts, searing thin trails into his wrists every few seconds. His frame was narrow, more shadow than flesh, cheeks swollen from a prior beating, collarbone protruding like a blade. And yet he walked, slow, deliberate, no fear, no stumble, not a soldier, not a warrior, just a boy. Also, they thought. The center of the arena waited, a flat circle marked with a crimson X where countless prisoners had died, bones ground underfoot, screams lost in static. Towering above it, standing still as a god carved in black steel, was General Harkthal of the Galactic Dominion. 7 feet of muscle, metal, and menace. Obsidian flesh engraved with combat runes that pulsed green under the harsh white lights. One tusk broken from a prior war, one eye replaced with a red scope capable of heat-tracing molecules. His armor was a patchwork of victory, bits of skin from conquered species stitched into the chestplate, and across his left pauldron, a strip of human scalp braided. He waited, still a stone. The crowd went feral when the boy reached him, spitting, laughing, throwing bones, stones, and flashes of bright venom down into the pit. Above, camera drones zoomed in to catch every twitch, every blink. This was their show. Harkthal looked down at the boy and laughed. The sound was mechanical and wet, like metal scraping inside a throat full of gravel. "This," he bellowed, his voice carried through 1,000 speakers. "This is what Earth sends. A child? A bone-racked dress and skin." More laughter. The boy said nothing. He only looked up. Bruised eye, blooded lip, torn shirt. No blink, no flinch. Harkthal circled him like a predator who had already eaten, but wanted to kill for the sport. "Your species is pitiful, soft, emotional. You throw tantrums when your children die. You kneel when we demand obedience. You break so easily." He leaned closer. "Tell me, child, did you cry when they took your planet? When we crushed your cities and burned your oceans?" Still, the boy said nothing, only stared. The general's eyes narrowed. A ripple of anger flashed in his veins. "Speak, or I'll split your tongue and feed it to the crowd." He waited. Nothing. And that was when he decided to make it theatrical. The slap came without warning. A massive backhand, full force, claws out. It hit the boy square in the jaw, snapping his head sideways with a sickening crack. Blood burst from his mouth, spraying in a neat red arc across the sand. The noise it made was thunderous, a wet, echoing boom that rang through the Colosseum like a thunderclap. The boy staggered, his knees buckling. He fell to one hand, blood dripping from his mouth to the bones beneath. The crowd erupted. Roars, whistles, savage applause. Camera drones locked in. Screens replayed the impact in slow motion. Again and again, the sound repeated for effect. Flesh meeting claw, skin splitting open. And yet, the boy stood up, slowly, straightening like a puppet pulled by an unseen hand. He rose to full height, barely to the general's chest, but taller than any creature had ever felt in that arena. He turned his head back, mouth dripping blood, and spoke, just loud enough for the general to hear it. The words passed through a broken smile. "You've got 2 seconds to live." It was not a threat. It was a fact. The general squinted, confused. The boy's left arm snapped free. There was no key, no external device. The electro-cuff simply disintegrated as wires and thin metal filaments burst from beneath the skin of his forearm, uncoiling like whipcords. The bindings were a trick. The boy had never been restrained. He had been waiting. First second, the cords wrapped around the general's neck and waist. Not randomly, not wild, precisely, like they had been engineered to know the kill paths of 100 species. The general moved, trying to tear them off. He was strong, strong enough to bench a dropship. It didn't matter. Second. The boy launched into the air. He spun as he rose, his legs coiling mid-flight, wrapping around the general's throat like a hangman's noose. There was a flicker of light, a screech of torque, and the sound that followed was not natural. A wet crunch, a shattering pop, a gurgle. The general's skull exploded inside his armor. Literally exploded, bone shards piercing his brain, face collapsing inward as if crushed by an invisible god. The body stood for a full breath longer, trembling, spasming, then collapsed into the dust like a monument torn down by time. Dead! Just like that. The crowd froze. Not a sound. Then screams. Then chaos. People ran, leapt from their seats. Alien dignitaries ducked. Drones veered. Guards spilled into the pit. Sirens erupted in 4 languages. The show was over, but the boy wasn't finished. He stood alone in the center, blood dripping down his arm, face cut open, mouth still smiling. He looked up at the nearest drone, his eyes locked onto it, unblinking. Somewhere, deep in the Empire's data relays, the drone feed sent a message directly to the Dominion Command Network. Facial recognition screamed. K-07. That was the name buried in forgotten files. One of Earth's old Black Ops projects. A failure. They had called it. Dead for years. Lost in an escape attempt. But there he stood. Not dead. Not lost. A weapon. The boy lifted one hand and raised a single finger to his temple. Then tapped it. Tag. You're marked. The drone feed went black. He was gone a second later. Gone like smoke through cracks. When the guards reached the corpse, the only thing left behind was a string of letters burned into the general's chest with some kind of acid filament. For Earth. For the slap. And so it began. The escape was not a retreat. It was a message. The boy, K-07, once labeled as a failed experiment, did not vanish like prey. He exited the arena as if it were his stage, leaving behind only the shattered skull of a galactic general and a trail of fractured protocol. Blood still dripped from his lip, and he didn't bother to wipe it away. It glistened like war paint in the blue emergency lights as he disappeared into the underbelly of Korath VS structure. Sirens screamed in 9 languages. Squad bot deployed from hidden hatches in the arena walls, dropping by the dozen, chrome chassis gleaming, plasma carbines raised. None of them mattered. He had already mapped their timing. Every pattern, every blind spot, every millisecond delay between an alarm being triggered and a squad being dispatched. They were machines. He was a consequence. He moved through the ducts like breath, twisting through hot tunnels of steam and poison gas, crawling over corpse-flecked pipes, dancing on silence. The Empire hadn't expected a fight. They certainly hadn't expected a human. And absolutely no one expected him. K-07, Ash, was a whisper from a nightmare the Empire had tried to erase. Project Twilight Protocol, initiated 20 years ago by Earth's Unified Shadow Division, had a simple goal: build perfect infiltrators from the unwanted, the pretty, the underestimated. Orphans, runaways, boys who could smile like sunlight and slit throats in the dark. They were shaped by silence, sculpted with nano-weapons embedded in their flesh. Muscles rewired for zero-gravity assassination, eyes calibrated for low-light killing. Emotions scorch away in white rooms. They didn't wear armor. They didn't need guns. They were weapons. Ash was their brightest success, and Earth had buried him alive. Or so they thought. Ash exited into the underdarks of the arena minutes later. Oxygen fog hissed through rusted vents as terrified janitorial droids scrambled out of his way. Overhead, klaxons still bellowed, and squads spread across every docking ring. He didn't run. He walked. Right into Dock 9, where a small Dominion courier vessel was prepping for departure. 2 guards stood outside, laughing nervously, rifles in hand, unaware that their death was already in motion. Ash didn't bother with subtlety. The first guard's throat opened with a quick flick of wire from under Ash's sleeve, silent, surgical. The second turned, screaming something in Cathal dialect, raising his gun. Too late. Ash leapt, landed on the man's chest, and crushed his windpipe with one bare foot. The man convulsed, dropped. Ash grabbed his pistol mid-full and fired 2 shots, one into the overhead camera, the other into the docking panel. The door slid open. Inside, the courier ship's pilot screamed and reached for a signal flare. Ash was already beside him, a palm to the neck. Twist. Snap. He sat the body down gently. The ship lifted off within 90 seconds. No pursuit. No lock-on. By the time Dominion Command authorized the blockade protocol, he was already gone, ghosting past Corinthia's gravitational field, silence blooming in his wake. He sat in the cockpit, breathing, not from exertion, but because it was beginning again. He stared down at his own hands, slender, pale, still trembling slightly from the kill. Not out of fear, but memory. The slap? That one act had done more than bruise his face. It had undone the coffin Earth placed him in. Reawakened the thing buried beneath layers of skin and scar. He had been told once, by his handler, a woman with a steel spine and an ashtray voice, that pain is memory sharpened into instinct. And now, he remembered everything. The arena had been a mistake. The slap had been a gift. 5 light years away, the Dominion's capital moon burned with panic. General Harkthol's death had triggered a ripple across every military broadcast in the system. His execution, live and in front of a galaxy-wide audience, was the first human kill of a sitting Dominion war leader in nearly a decade. It was not war. Not yet. But it was something older. Something worse. It was personal. High Admiral Vornax, head of the Corwell fleet, watched the footage again in silence. His third eye twitched as the boy's image froze on the final frame, blood trailing down his jaw, a quiet smile curling his lips. He said, Vornax growled, 2 seconds. Yes, sir, replied the intelligence officer beside him. And it was. Vornax narrowed all 3 of his eyes. Then Earth's shadows have reawakened. The officer hesitated. We thought the Twilight Protocol was dismantled. There were no signs of activity from any known operatives in. Vornax raised one finger, and the man stopped speaking. You didn't think. You believed. He toned, each boot step like a thunderclap. Belief doesn't kill assassins. Data does. Find the file. The real one. Ash didn't go to Earth. He didn't need to. He sent a message instead, piggybacking on the Dominion ship's transponder, carving his voice into its wake. A single broadcast, 13 seconds long. No visuals. Just sound. A voice, cold and quiet and young. You slapped a boy and thought it made you strong. You forgot what boys become when you don't let them die. The transmission ended with static, then silence, then, across 3 systems, Dominion admirals received data spikes, sudden outages. Minor, at first. Navigation glitches. Comms down for 5 seconds. Nothing serious. Until the death began. 2 hours later, Admiral Rex's personal shuttle exploded in the atmosphere of his private moon. Surveillance footage later showed a boy boarding in disguise, barefoot, bleeding, smiling. 3 hours after that, General Weishar's corpse was found dangling from the communications array on Cinder 3, throat wrapped in microfilament. Skin peeled to reveal the word. Ash. By dawn, Dominion Command declared an emergency Level 0 incursion event. They locked down 20 stations, suspended all human traffic across 7 systems, and reactivated File Omega 13, the list of Earthborn operatives marked terminated who were now possibly still alive. Ash was number 4 on the list. But what chilled them more was number 5. K08. Call sign, Ember. Last known location, unspecified. Presumed dead. The file ended with a single line. If K08 reactivates, we suggest planetary evacuation. And somewhere, deep in the black void between Dominion systems, a second broadcast echoed into forgotten relays. This time, it wasn't a voice. It was a melody, a simple lullaby, a human tune. And at the end, a whisper, "Brother." Ash heard it while repairing his stolen vessel in a derelict orbital field. The sound crept from the speakers like a ghost, slow and hollow. He froze. It couldn't be. Not after all these years. Not after what they had done to him. To them. But it was. His twin. Ember. Alive. Somewhere. And that meant only one thing. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was resurrection. And no one, not generals, not empires, not entire species, would survive it. The outer rim of the Goros expanse was where wreckage went to rot. A graveyard of dead ships, Broken satellites and forgotten war relics floated endlessly in the dark, shrouded in electrical storms and static interference strong enough to eat navigational data alive. No one flew here unless they were suicidal, stupid, or hiding. Ash was hiding. His stolen Dominion courier now drifted among the dead, lights dimmed, life support flickering like a heartbeat in a coma. He sat shirtless in the cockpit, a needle in one hand, a micro-welder in the other, working silently beneath a trail of surgical scars that laddered his spine like a barcode. Each scar had a name. Each name had a scream. He was fixing the damage, the fractured ribs from his fight in the arena, the sliced tendon near his left wrist that snagged during the kill, and the fried connection port just beneath his collarbone that was supposed to feed neural data to his forearm wires. He'd bled too much too quickly. Now he was rearming. His eyes were half shut. Not in pain. He didn't feel pain like normal people. It registered, but it never lingered. What lingered was memory. The slap still echoed across his brain like a static hum. Not because of its force, but because of what it symbolized. The Empire had looked down at him and saw a child. It didn't matter that he had trained since age 5. It didn't matter that his bones had been reinforced with carbon-threaded filaments, or that his reflex time clocked faster than most AI response algorithms. They didn't see the weapon. They saw the softness, the face, the slightness, the weakness, and they made the mistake of touching it. A red light blinked on the console, an encrypted comm burst from a forgotten frequency. No one should have had this channel, not even Earth's last known ops. Ash paused, wiped the blood from his fingers, and pressed a single button. It opened. The message wasn't a voice. It was a lullaby again, the same one from childhood. The one sung in the underground creche where K07 and K08 were raised like wolves pretending to be boys. No language, just tune. Then came the whisper, "Brother." Ash exhaled sharply, chest tightening in a way no blade could replicate. He didn't respond immediately. He just sat there, letting the dark hum of the expanse wash over him as he stared at the comm. Ember was alive. The Dominion hadn't killed him, which meant if they lied about Ember, what else had they buried? His fingers danced across the console, rapid and precise. Within seconds, he was running every backdoor he remembered. Earth servers were long shut, but a few husks still floated between private relay buoys, data ghosts, hardened against time. Ash breached them one by one. The records were redacted, shattered, burned, but bits survived. One document made his pulse slow. Project Mercy, a Dominion Earth Black Pact created after the war. All remaining Twilight Protocol assets were to be terminated, their DNA maps sold to biotech war merchants, their bodies used to train alien hunters in human fragility. Ash had escaped. Ember hadn't. He read the words again. Subject K08, unstable. Recommended for deconstruction. The line shook something in him that felt dangerously close to rage. They hadn't just abandoned them. They'd dissected them. Ash stood from the cockpit and walked into the back cabin, where a slab of alloy served as both bunk and weapon rack. He opened the recessed compartment and stared at the case inside. A black case, marked with the insignia of Twilight Protocol. He hadn't touched it in years. Not since Earth buried him. Now, hand steady, he opened it. Inside were weapons shaped for silence, 2 wrist coils made of magnetic nanothread, each capable of slicing through composite armor, a pair of monofilament scalpels forward for wet work, and at the bottom, a thin black mask. Smooth, faceless, no eye slits, no vents. The reaping mask. Ash picked it up slowly, like a priest handling relics. He remembered putting it on the first time, how the silence of it closed around him like a second skin, how it erased the boy underneath. The fear, the confusion, the loneliness. Wearing it made him something else, something useful. And if Ember was alive, he was going to need it again. He donned the mask. The interface snapped to life inside, lighting up with biometric readouts, targeting overlays, and comm intercepts. He tapped twice behind his ear. The signal locked. "Ember," he whispered, voice now distorted through the mask speaker. "Where?" The answer came not in coordinates, but screams. A live feed. Someone had jacked into a Dominion broadcast signal, hijacked a classified transmission. The footage was raw, brutal. A Dominion research vessel floating above the gas giant Droska, torn open, bodies spilling out. Not shot, not exploded, dismantled. The footage cut to a hallway inside the ship, walls dripping with blackened blood. Symbols carved into the steel in languages a Dominion didn't speak. The feed stuttered, then steadied, then focused on a single figure walking slowly down the hallway. Slim, shirtless, blood smeared down his spine in deliberate strokes. A boy, just like Ash. But not Ash. Ember. He moved like poetry dragged through razors. His eyes, silver from genetic tuning, were wide, unfocused. His mouth whispered words that didn't match his voice. And around him, corpses, stacked neatly, smiling. Ash said nothing that he just watched, until the feed cut, and then he moved. An hour later, every Dominion beacon near Droska went dead. Their patrol ship, DTS Vanguard, vanished from all scanners before it could send its final report. The only clue? An emergency burst transmission filled with static, and a single line of text burned into the comm log. Reunion. Ash arrived at Droska on a hijacked freighter and slipped past the blockade unnoticed. His mask filtered the storm's interference, guiding him through the planet's upper atmosphere until he saw the wreckage. The Dominion research vessel was split open like a can, hovering in slow orbit. No distress beacons, no surviving crew, only silence and smoke as drifted INO chute. No backup, just his mask, his breath, and his mission. Inside, he walked through chaos. Doors half shut with severed limbs wedged in them. Consoles smeared with fingerprints. Emergency lighting pulsing red like a heartbeat gone mad. Then he saw it, the word carved into the wall with something sharp and deliberate slap back. He smiled behind the mask. He followed the markings, symbols scratched into the floor, notes in blood, faint musical notes embedded into the console files. He followed them like a trail, until he found a core chamber. Ember sat in the center of it, cross-legged, barefoot, shirtless, eyes closed. Around him, 20 Dominion corpses, seated upright like children around a campfire. Each one had its eyes removed and its mouth sewn shut with human hair. Ember opened his eyes as Ash stepped forward. He smiled. Brother. Ash stopped, his throat tightened. Ember, what did they do to you? Ember tilted his head. They tried to make me forget you. Ash dropped to one knee, face close. I remembered, Ember whispered. Every second, every breath. Ash reached forward slowly. Ember met him. And there, in the middle of a slaughtered ship, the two twinks, built to kill, trained to die, embraced like brothers reborn in blood and ruin. And outside, orbiting above them like the eye of a dead god, the Dominion fleet scrambled, unaware that two weapons had just reunited. Not for war, for vengeance. The stars looked different now. Ash watched them through the cracked viewport of a stolen Dominion scout vessel, his mask set on passive mode, every internal feed focused outward while his mind spiraled inward. Next to him, Ember sat on the edge of the console, chewing dry protein like it was his last meal. He stared at the stars too, but he wasn't looking at them. He was listening. The stars don't talk to everyone, Ember whispered suddenly, voice sharp, faintly musical. But when they do, they lie. Ash didn't flinch. He'd learned long ago that madness didn't always come from weakness. Sometimes it was a scar left behind by surviving. He studied his brother's face. Ember had changed. Sharper now, hollow around the eyes, fingers twitching every few seconds like muscle memory refused to forget how many throats it had slit. There was something behind his smile, too, like a child had drowned in him, and the thing that floated back up only wore the skin. They lied to me for years, Ember continued. Said you died in orbit. Told me your body burned up in re-entry. Ash adjusted the ship's course silently. They lied to both of us. Ember laughed. Not loud, not cruel, just amused. Didn't stop me from killing everyone who told me. The ship passed into the shadow of a rogue moon, blackening the cockpit in momentary darkness. Ember stopped smiling. They're afraid now, he said. Did you feel it? Ash nodded. They've issued a system-wide red protocol. Dominion High Command hasn't authorized one since the Garrix uprising. And we're not even an army. No, Ash said. We're worse. There were no more words between them for a while. Ash brought up the next objective. The screen displayed a rotating schematic of a space fortress, Sentinel Core 9, an orbital military hub once considered unbreachable. It served as a command and control center for 7 nearby systems. More importantly, it was where the Dominion trained and stored its organic assets. Twilight assets. Failed experiments. The ones like them. Ash magnified a sector on the map. A lower floor. Sublevel Theta Black. Code-named the Cage. That's where they kept you, he murmured. Ember's hand stopped twitching. His lips thinned into a cold line. Yes, that's where they broke me. Ash turned toward him. You want to burn it? No, Ember said, rising to his feet. I want to make them watch while it burns. They landed through the corpse chute. Literally. Sentinel Core 9 had orbital waste tunnels used to eject biological remains from internal experiments, an under-monitored access point no one in the command structure ever cared to secure. It was too foul, too forgotten, too beneath them. Perfect. Ash dropped first, sliding down a steel gut line with decay. His boots hit the grating of sublevel gamma, where the sound of recycled ventilation hissed like distant snakes. Seconds later, Ember landed beside him, barefoot, silent, practically smiling. Ash unsheathed his wrist filaments. Ember didn't. He didn't need to. His fingers were already twitching with rhythm. Killing was his music now. Everything else was static. They moved fast, through auxiliary corridors laced with piping, past maintenance shafts and sleeping chambers for underpaid researchers. Ash led. Ember followed. Behind them, the Dominion's most advanced AI security system, LUXX, failed to detect a single trace. They weren't in the system. They were under it, room by room. They mapped the floor in their heads, Ash planting pulse dampeners on doors, Ember rewiring light panels with hair-thin conductors. By the time alarm could scream, their blades would already be soaked. Sublevel Theta Black was protected by a magnetic seal, door requiring triple bio authorization. Ember didn't wait. He walked up to the panel and placed his hand on it. The panel flashed, then turned green. Ash arched a brow. They still think I'm theirs, Ember said. The door opened. Inside was not a cell block. It was a nightmare press into steel. Rows of pods, each one containing a child no older than 20. Some still, some trembling, none awake, all floating in nutrient gel, masked and naked. Wires ran through their limbs, their spines, their skulls. Ash stopped walking. So did Ember. They made more, Ember whispered, voice barely audible. Ash reached out and touched the pod closest to him. A boy, maybe 15, with facial features too symmetrical to be natural. His chest rose and fell in measured pace, but his eyelids fluttered as if trapped in a loop of dreams he couldn't escape from. They are not finished, Ash said. No, Ember said. They are preparing for the next war. Ash stared. They are replacing us. No, Ember said again, darker now. They are recycling us. Behind them, a klaxon wailed. The Dominion had finally noticed. The lights turned blood red. Doors sealed across upper levels. Ash tapped his wrist and sent a coded signal. Every pulse dampener he'd planted flickered to life. Lights blew out. The alarm cut to static. Gun turrets blinked and drooped. They weren't trapped. Everyone else was. The first security team that arrived never made it past the threshold. Ember danced between them, blades hidden under his fingers, cutting with joyless efficiency. Ash broke the last one's neck with one hand, never blinking. They stood in the crimson-lit room, surrounded by bodies and breathing tubes. Then Ash spoke. What do we do with them? He wasn't talking about the guards. He meant the children. Ember walked to a nearby console and scanned a data core. His smile faded. They are brain-mapped, indoctrination in real time, loop programming to overwrite memories. They'll never be human again. They'll be us. No, Ember whispered. They'll be worse, because they'll obey. Ash stared at the boy in the nearest pod, a child who might have been him once, and reached into the control panel. Don't, Ember said. Ash paused. You want to leave them like this? I want to end it, Ember replied. All of it. Ash closed his eyes. His fingers hovered over the emergency purge system. His heart made no sound. Then he pressed it. The pods hissed open, one by one, not to save them, to free them. The air filled with chemicals. The nutrient gel drained. Their pulses stopped. All of them. Silent, swift, merciful. Ember didn't smile, but he looked lighter. "You did it," he said. "No," Ash murmured. "We did what they wouldn't. We gave them what we never got. Peace. A choice." Footsteps thundered above. Too many. A full squad. Ember toned, licking blood off his knuckles. "I'm ready." Ash nodded, pulling down his mask. "So am I." The door burst open. But it wasn't guards. It was children. Half-clothed, bleeding, limping, escaping from cells the purge hadn't reached. 20 of them. Maybe more. Some looked human. Others, barely. Claws. Eyes too wide. Spines augmented with exposed wire. They had survived. Somehow, they stared at Ash and Ember. Then one spoke. "Are you like us?" Ash stepped forward, pulled off his mask. "No," he said. "You're like us." The smallest one stepped forward. His voice shook. "What now?" Ash looked to Ember. Ember tilted his head, then grinned. "Now we teach you how to end an empire." They moved like ghosts across the stars. 23 survivors, 2 reapers, and a ship that had no name anymore, just scars painted in every language of pain. Ash stood at the helm, silent, masked, his fingers steady on the nav pod as Ember moved through the lower decks, speaking to the children one by one. Not like a leader, not like a brother, like a warning dressed in flesh. He didn't offer comfort. He offered truth. And the truth was simple. They were already dead. All of them. What walked now, what breathed, was vengeance wearing skin. The youngest among the survivors was 9, barely tall enough to look over the supply counter. The oldest had teeth sharper than any Dominion soldier and spoke in numbers instead of words. Some wept at night. Others screamed in their sleep. One had ripped off a finger just to see if it would grow back. It did. Ember didn't flinch at any of it. Neither did Ash. You don't flinch at mirrors. And they were all mirrors now. Fractured pieces of a project that should never have lived. They were built in the Empire's image. Now they would be the last image the Empire ever saw. They arrived at Corwell Prime under a false flag, the stolen signature of a Dominion medical transport. Ember had forged it by hand, using blood samples pulled from one of the many corpses he'd once arranged into chairs aboard Sentinel Core 9. The system's defense AI didn't even blink. It let them through. Big mistake. Ash landed the ship on a restricted docking bay 2 levels beneath the Imperial Hall of Governance. No alarms. No resistance. Yet, they moved in silence. Ash and Ember led the way, the children behind them, draped in black, barefoot, faces smeared in ash on the burned files of sublevel Theta. They didn't carry rifles. They didn't carry explosives. They carried intent. And intent is the deadliest weapon. The first guard didn't understand what he was seeing. He stuttered something into his communicator. Then one of the children, a girl with a neural cord grafted into her neck, touched him, and he forgot how to breathe. He died screaming. The second tried to draw a gun. Ash was faster. The wire slipped through the air like a whisper. One flick. One twist. The guard's throat opened like a page. By the time Dominion Command noticed the breach, it was already too late. Ash walked straight into the Hall of Wills, a tower of glass and gold, where the 12 surviving Dominion generals waited. They'd seen the footage. They'd heard the transmissions. They had armed drones overhead. Shields active. Warships in orbit. It didn't matter. The doors opened without effort, and Ash stepped through, followed by Ember, and behind them, the 23, the last children of the program. The doors closed again. Locked. And what happened inside wasn't war. It was reckoning. The hole was soundproofed. But what followed cracked the glass windows anyway. Flashes of light. Screams. Shadows on fire. One general tried to crawl away, dragging the lower half of his body that no longer obeyed him. One child, genderless, faceless, eyes as white as death, sat on his chest and asked if he remembered them. He didn't. So they opened his skull. Ash didn't kill them all. Some were left breathing. Just barely. So they could see what happened next. Ash walked to the throne console, the seat of Dominion authority, a pillar of technology fed by billions of voices. Data, history, control. He sat today. For the first time in his life, Ash sat on something that didn't feel like a cage. He tapped into the Dominion's live broadcast systems. The screen blinked. Galaxies turned their attention, and saw a boy with a broken mouth and steel behind his eyes. Ash didn't smile. He didn't blink. He spoke once. They slapped the boy in front of everyone. He leaned forward, so he crushed their skulls. The message was not metaphor. The camera panned. The 12 generals, skulls open, mouths ruined, pride reduced to twitching muscle and urine, sat in a neat circle behind him, silent, defeated, dying. The screen cut again. Now, ships exploded in orbit. Dominion Warcraft sabotaged from inside. Codes overridden. Engines detonated. By children, the survivors of the failed protocol, finally returned to sender. Hours later, Dominion colonies across 50 systems received their final instruction from High Command. Cease! That was the only word. No full retreat. No surrender. Just cease. Because no one knew where the next child might be. No one knew who had survived, or how many were watching. Ash and Ember stood outside the ruins of the hole, smoke curling around them. The children gathered quietly. Some chewed raw wires. Some just stared at the sky. Ember lit a cigarette made from the dried pages of the Twilight Protocol manual. Ash looked at the sunrise. "Is it over?" one of the children asked. Ash didn't answer. He looked to Ember. Ember exhaled smoke through a smile and said, "Nothing's ever over, but it's quieter now." Ash turned to the others. "You're free." They didn't cheer. They didn't weep. They just stood there as if waiting for permission to feel. One girl stepped forward, eyes flickering with the last sparks of implanted code. "What are we supposed to do now?" Ash knelt in front of her. He took her hand. "Anything you want." Her fingers trembled, then tightened around his. The moment passed. Above them, the Dominion flag still burned, and below it, in the date, the children left behind a symbol. 3 lines, one for the slap, one for the skull, and one for the silence that followed. They vanished afterward. Some said they walked into the void. Others said they became new myths. One story claimed they were seen years later, twin boys with bare feet and dead eyes, kneeling beside the ruins of another world, carving names into the dust. But no matter the tale, the ending was always the same. The Empire remembered, because memory wasn't something you could erase. Not when the ones you tried to bury came back wearing your nightmares. Not when you slapped a boy in front of everyone, and he crushed your skull in 2 seconds.